Hello and welcome to Anxiety Diaries, a weekly podcast about mental health, incredible people, and much more. I'm your host, Scott Newmeyer, and this week is going to be a little bit different. Most weeks we'll have a guest on, we'll do an interview. That will be the crux of the episode, but this is called Anxiety Diaries, so I figured I should probably also talk a little bit about some of my own issues with panic and anxiety disorder that I've been dealing with for over a decade now. If you don't already know that much about me, I have a wife, I have 2 kids, 2 cats, own a house, I work every single day, I have a job, and a busy life. But I also deal with panic and anxiety disorder. A lot of times it keeps me in the house, it keeps me anxious during the day, and I generally don't feel the best all the time. And that's something that not only I have to deal with, but something that my wife has to deal with, my kids have to deal with, and sometimes the way I feel bleeds over into how I deal with them. And that's what I want to talk about today. Now, just a quick disclaimer. I am by no means a medical professional, nor are many of the guests you'll hear on the podcast. If you need help, please seek qualified medical attention. This podcast, while informative and fun, is no substitute for the real thing. With all that said, take a deep breath and relax. Here we go. Recently, my wife came to me and said that one of our 9-year-old daughter's best friend's parents wanted to know if she wanted to accompany them to New York City to see Frozen, the Broadway musical. And of course, she wanted to go. My daughter is a little bit anxious, but so is every 9-year-old. She has some things that bother her, but so does every 9-year-old. So when my wife asked her if she wanted to go, of course, she was super excited. As soon as she told her she was excited, she said yes immediately. She wanted to go. Me, on the other hand, I was a little anxious about it, and I told my wife if that were me, at 9 years old, I wouldn't have been able to go. And I'm not sure if that's true or not. Probably is true. But I'm a different person than her. It was a long time ago. I'm 38 years old now, so that was almost 30 years ago. She has been to the city once before, but that was with my wife. Now, these are parents that we absolutely love. They're great. We completely trust them 100%. So for me, my anxiety wasn't anything to do with them. I was not worried that they would be able to take care of her, that they would show her a great time, that everything would go off without a hitch. That was not my worry. My worry was about how my daughter would react to being in the big city, being surrounded by all these people, with someone that she's not with all the time. Not a parent, not another family member, but someone else. She's been places with other people before. This is obviously not an issue for her. She was not worried about it one bit. There was no sense of hesitation whatsoever when my wife asked her if she wanted to go see Frozen the musical. But inside me, something boiled up that made me feel uncomfortable and angry. I immediately felt angry, and that's so silly and unacceptable, and it doesn't make sense to me. But the more I thought about it, I spoke with my mother about it, I spoke with my sister about it, I spoke with my wife about it. Within 30 minutes of thinking this through, calming down, and really thinking about it, I knew we were going to let her go. And here's why. After I thought about it for a few minutes, I realized that what I was doing was projecting myself onto my daughter, my 9-year-old daughter. I was putting myself in her shoes, putting myself in her position, and thinking about how I would feel if I were going to the city to see Frozen the musical, surrounded by all these people. She didn't have any of these worries, but I did. And as soon as I recognized that I was projecting my own feelings onto her, I knew that I was going to let her go. Sure, I'd be nervous about it. Sure, I'd be thinking about it that day, but there was no reason for me not to let her go. She's a good kid. She does everything she's supposed to do. The parents she's going with are completely reliable, amazing parents, people we love, and people we trust. So what reason, other than my own anxiety and my own projection of my anxiety onto her, would be a reason for keeping her home? So we let her go. And guess what? She had a great time, nothing bad happened, and it's a memory she'll have for the rest of her life. She got to go with her best friends, she got to go with her best friend's family, they enjoyed the show, they had lunch, and they had a great time. She was exhausted when she got home, of course, because she didn't sleep the night before. She was so excited. But that's what 9-year-olds do. That's what happens with kids. In fact, I decided to have a quick interview with her the next morning. Here's the audio but please keep in mind that I recorded this very quickly on my iPhone, and she had just started to come down with a cold, so she's a little bit stuffy. It sounds a little wonky, but you'll get the gist. What was the best part of the show for you?
When Elsa's dress just like randomly just like exploded off, like queen dress exploded off into the ice dress when she sang "Let It Go."
Do you think your friends had a good time as well?
Absolutely.
What do you think their favorite parts were?
When the snow came down, like the fake paper snow from the ceiling.
On a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best thing you've ever seen, where would you rank Frozen the musical?
5.
So this was your first Broadway show. How did you feel before you went? Were you nervous? Were you excited? What were you feeling this morning?
I was very excited, and I couldn't wait. Like this was the excitement was just bursting out of my chest to go.
And how did you feel after the show?
I felt like it was the best thing I've ever seen in my life, and very tired because it was very long.
You were very tired also because you did not sleep well at all last night. What was the issue with sleeping last night?
I was excited. I had like butterflies in my tummy, and I just couldn't sleep. It was really hard for me.
Do you think you'll want to go to a Broadway musical again?
Yes.
What's the next Broadway's musical that you'd like to see?
SpongeBob SquarePants, a Broadway musical.
Are you hoping that Mommy will take you to see that?
Yes. She says she kind of doesn't want to see it, but she kind of does. She said that maybe one day she would, but I hope she does.
You went with your best friends. Is there anything that you'd want to say to them for taking you?
Thank you so much for letting me go and for making me like have a very good time in New York City.
Was this one of the most exciting days that you've ever had?
My life? Yes.
So that's it for the interview. Obviously, she had a great time, which really just brings home the point of what I've been trying to say this entire time. Sometimes when you're faced with these things, you have to step back, take a moment, and realize the effect that your feelings might have on someone else. And sometimes that's really difficult to do. And for me, it almost prevented me from letting my daughter have one of the best memories of her young childhood. And I'm so glad that I sat back and I thought about it, and I didn't allow that to happen. A lot of times when you're dealing with panic and anxiety, there's a worry that you'll pass these things on to your children. And this is something that I worry about a lot. One of my main concerns is passing my anxieties down to my children. And that's not something I want to happen. So this situation, I just thought would be a great one to share because it's one that really touches on a lot of different points in the anxious mind. Worrying about your kids, but also worrying about yourself and how you feel about them. But for me, this was a victory. My reaction initially was terrible, which is often the case with me because, when you're anxious, that's what happens sometimes. Immediately you get anxious and you can lash out or you can get quiet and insular. It's different for everybody. But for me, sometimes that happens. And I'm glad that I was able to fix it. I'm glad I was able to turn things around. And I'm glad I was able to recognize that I was making a mistake. I was projecting myself onto my daughter, and that's not something she deserves. Which leads me to my question for you this week. Have you ever done something for your children, with your children, to your children, that you look back now and you see as a reflection of how you were feeling about yourself? Have you ever prevented your child from doing something because you were anxious about it, even though they may have been excited? Would love to hear what you think. You can call and leave us a voicemail at 732-903-4441 or send us an email, anxietydiariespodcast@gmail.com. And as always, check us out on Facebook at Anxiety Diaries Podcast, Instagram at Anxiety Diaries Podcast, and on Twitter at Anxiety Diary Pod. Check us out on www.anxietydiariespodcast.com. Like I said, this is a little bit different of an episode, but every once in a while we'll sprinkle some of these things in from my own anxiety diaries. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.